Okay, so we are recording right now, and the first thing is we want to demonstrate how to use the current development platform. And we assume that you have checked in everything in CM. To get the newest code, maybe the safest thing is to go by hand in each one of the repositories. There are 3 CD AI services. And if you don't know how to check them out, discuss this on Slack, and then or clone, then we clone it from there. So I say git pull. Now I have the latest version of this particular code. I go to the directory nist, cd nist, which I've also cloned. I say git pull. Now I go to the directory cloudmesh catalog, and I say git pull. So now I'm certain that I have the latest code, just in case we want to go to the cloudmesh catalog directory and say pip install -e dot. I know that's not necessary because you already have done this, but because I modified certain things on my machine, I needed to do that. So now if I say CMS help, I should be seeing the catalog command in there. I can say CMS catalog log. And it shows me what commands are available. Not all the commands are implemented. So the first thing that we do is we look into the NIST directory, because this is where our entries are. And we want to create entries that have that use our converter to BibTeX or to Markdown and to Hugo. So there is a makefile in there. And I know on Windows you may not have makefiles, but you can install makefile in Windows, figure it out. There is something called Chocolati, and then you can install makefiles. It makes your life easier.
I have a Mac, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know that, but all the other people don't.
Okay, so
Macintosh, it will be no problem. You will be able to run it. And in case you don't have makefiles, you can run these commands one after another. So the command that is implemented is the catalog export command BibTeX, MD, and Hugo. So if I now say make, all the converters will be started and the conversion is being created. Now, one of the things that we can do is we can list our converted output. And maybe I should once more show the makefile. I can also do this by hand while copying this line here. It's just one example. And it converts now the BibTeX entries. Now, where do you find the BibTeX entries? One thing that I implemented is that this particular command works recursively on all files that are ending with a YAML ending from this source tree. So recursively through, not just one, but all the files that it can actually find. So this way, it's very convenient to add. So in catalog, we have, for example, many files, and under there we have many YAML files, and there may be other directories underneath here. And as you can see, all these YAML files will be used for input as the source. So when I execute this particular command here, it will be going through all of these files, and for each one of them create a BibTeX file. Now, where do you find them? They're being really stored next to the file. So if you go into, for example, the Amazon catalog, say ls catalog AWS, you find here naturally the YAML files in there, but you also find the BibTeX files in there. Bib. There is for each file a bib file created. And because we did the markdown, there is a markdown file created, but there are actually 2 markdown files, one for Hugo and one for regular markdown. So let's take a look a little bit into the code, how the code is being organized. And the code is organized as follows. I use PyCharm because PyCharm is superior in my view to many other editors, but this is your preference. You can use Emacs, VI, or Visual Code, whatever you like, but PyCharm is typically best. I recently found out that under help, you can increase the memory settings because I was running out of memory with PyCharm, but this you can only do if you have sufficient memory. I set mine up to 4 gigabyte, I believe, or megabyte. So you can increase that in case you're running out of space, but make sure that your machine has enough space available. Once you apply this, I suggest that you save and restart. Now, our code is in catalog, obviously. Catalog contains a directory called cloudmesh. That is a shared namespace in Python. That means I can have a cloudmesh package that is distributed amongst multiple source code directories, so it makes development easier. But that's a detail that you may not need to understand. It's just there for you. You don't have to look into this. In cloudmesh, we have now a subdirectory called catalog. That's where we are developing our code. In here, we have 2 relevant organizations. One in catalog itself, there's a whole bunch of Python files in there, and one that is called command. The command, remember when we executed the command, we did CMS catalog, and here you get a help message with all the features of this particular command. You can also say CMS man or help catalog. Then you're not only getting the manual page, the usage, but also the help manual. Now, this manual is just introduced in this command itself when we are looking here in catalog. So when you are going in here and going to the top of the file, you find the, unfortunately, it's a little bit grayed out. I didn't set the colors nicely, but it shows here in this light gray color what this manual page looks like. And from this manual page, a dictionary is being created that I can use to query if I, for example, invoke the command list or init or export in addition to catalog, as well as these parameters that I can specify. And the brackets are essentially meaning optional. And so we can easily go into this command. So one of the commands that we now look into as an example is this bibtech command, because we have showcased that this produces actually something useful. And we want to figure out how that actually works. Now, there is a description here, and the description may or may not yet fit to up here. This was just done by me, and it's up to all of you guys to make sure that the description really does match something. So, for example, we have here the name. Sometimes we have the name here and not. What does it mean that there's a name? Maybe we don't need to have a name in bibtech. Export, and as you can see, we don't have it here. We have just the name and the destination. But when I invoked it, I only invoked the first part, the source, and didn't specify a destination. The destination means essentially you create a new directory and you copy what you have done into this new directory rather than into where the source is itself, so that you have some kind of mechanism to verify what you have done is correct without destroying things. I, however, haven't actually tested that. So that's up to you guys to implement and to verify if this works. So now when we go down to the explanation, here we have an explanation about how we do bibtech. And I see here we have, I have actually removed this MD here for Hugo. So we now only have Hugo. So here we have our bibtech entry, and it explains, okay, if I invoke this, and as you can see, here's an error. This should be called source and a source. And as you can see, the other ones have also this error here. So let's just fix this up. But this way you can actually already see how we are going to be improving this. And there was a Hugo, which also had the source here instead of the name.
So when you actually call those commands, can you put something in the parameter for source and destination to actually get it to source out to a different file?
Yes.
Okay, so for
And-
most of these commands, we should definitely be changing all of the help options for it.
Well, I think
I mean, the
this is
manual options.
already implemented. It's just we just need to be making
Yeah, the manual options.
that this particular part, which is the main part, is reflected in our description.
Okay, yeah.
Description may not be, it's not relevant really, but this description helps you and others out how to use that particular thing. And so I would assume we need to be making sure that the descriptions actually do reflect what this thing is supposed to be doing. This requires a little bit looking into the source code or modifying the source code towards what our description ought to be, right? So now when we look into this BibTeX thing, one of the things I've done is I've created a program that checks if there's an option. The option is with minus source, for example, right? See this thing here?
Mm-hmm.
So this map parameters means this is I'm looking into this description, into the usage, if minus source is specified, and then I rename it simply to source instead of minus source, because I find it really difficult to work with minus source.
The map parameter has a parameter argument for source. So when actually stating the description, is it trivial just to put source there, or do we need that actual data?
The description stays all the same. It's just for us in programming. So one of the things that we would normally have to do, is if arguments of minus source, and then I have to do something, right? So then I say print. You know, the problem is this: I have so many of them that it becomes very difficult to read, in my view.
Yeah,
so it's much easier to read if I were to do this, or if I could do this, which is not necessarily a Python thing. So if you know Ruby or other languages, they have the stop notation for dictionaries. And so what I've implemented is I've implemented this dot notation for this arguments parameter. So I don't have to specify quote open minus source, quote closed. I can simply say source. Interesting. Well, then again, this is all given to you for free, right? So now I can actually formulate my if conditions really easily. And sometimes I do actually the following thing: is I go to the top line because I sometimes forget what I implemented, and I copy this line here, and I now create an if condition to this. The if condition here is this BibTeX. I pass this in here as a comment, so that I'm reminded what I need to be implementing. See, so if I have specified BibTeX, then I do something. As you can see, there's also a keyword argument export. So it would actually be useful to have also arguments dot export here. So this way I know that this will be matching this particular condition. Now, since I have this particular condition, I see that in my implementation, I have a source, which I simply read out of source, and I'm passing this along. However, there's also destination. So I can now simply say this is because I have put this in here, I can also say arguments.destination. Now I can say if arguments dot destination then I do something here. I for example, say print. Actually, I can say console. Oh, to print destination not yet implemented. And then I simply return with nothing. Basically, I don't execute this program, right?
Mhm.
So now when I'm on the command line, remember that we executed this bibtec command, which I can't find right now. So we have CMS cat. Oh, let me do the cat again. So remember, this was our command that we wanted to execute. So this works, right? So now we have minus destination equal A, maybe, right? And when I execute this now, it should have said, hey, this cannot be executed. So now let's figure out what we have done wrong. Maybe the one thing, I'm maybe standing in the wrong directory.
So in reality, when you type that export big text source catalog equals destination, that command after destination, if you were to put like a place for that destination, like a directory, theoretically it would source out that bibtext to that destination.
Not theoretically, it doesn't, because we haven't implemented it.
Well, I mean, like that's what we're trying to work
That's what we
towards.
try to do, yes.
Okay.
So then we specify here A, and actually it shouldn't even execute the rest of it. So now, in order for us to debug it, we can use another command that I implemented. So I can actually look into the array, and if I say CMS debug on and execute this command now, it not only tells me what this is, but it also shows me the content of arguments. And here you can see now there's a minus source that says catalog.
Destination is equal to A.
And then we have destination equal to A, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now the problem is we have actually specified a destination. And now it should actually print this thing here. So it's unclear to me why we are not seeing the destination. So because we have seen this, so if arguments of destination, then we should do something, but apparently it does something more. And I don't know why there is a programming bug now for some reason. Maybe we make here an else, and we just try if this will work. I think it will not work. There will be still a bug in there. So so there is still a bug. Maybe it's because I have a wrong version. Let me just figure out if I have installed this version. And the reason is I had multiple versions today installed, and I may have to initiate my environment. So I may not be able to show you this here in this board. Yeah, I can't show it because it actually conflicts with another installation of this. Yeah, there is a programming error somewhere in there. So we have to figure this out. So nevertheless, it goes into this in some form, and it invokes this other thing here. And
Is the code for the verbose arguments, are those implemented in the catalog? As in like the arguments dot destination, arguments dot source, are those like those commands, are those implemented in the catalog?
yeah, so now we are going down this catalog code. So in the catalog code, now we find here the source, which is the argument source, and there is a converter and a convert bibtag. This is what we are calling. The converter now is, when you look at the very top of this code here, imported, there is a convert, right? See catalog convert.
Yeah.
So if you see this is catalog convert.
Yeah.
Here. So this is what we are calling. Now in here, we have a converter that we use, and we will show you how we use this later on a little bit. So in the converter, we remember when I did the ls to find all the files, basically. This one here, YAML. This I can do in Python, and so I implemented this in Python. This is the Python equivalent for that.
Okay, and that
now
so that grabs find source from dir self source equals none.
This returns a dictionary. In that dictionary, it's just like a list of these files.
Okay. Yeah.
So the next thing is I want to create actually a bibtag converter. So in order for me to make it simple, I'm passing actually a function, which is a little bit more advanced Python. I create a function that takes the source directory, goes through all the files in that directory, and converts each one of them, right? But in order for me to do that, I need to have a function that does this for a single file, okay?
Yeah.
So this function here now is the conversion when the source is a single file. So what I have is the source has an ending with YAML, and my destination should be the same file name, but with bib replaced, okay? So remember that I take one of those files here. I take the YAML file, I replace the YAML with bib. This converts it to, this gives me the destination as a string. Okay, understood?
Yeah.
Now I invoke the converter. The converter is a program that takes a single one of those things and converts the source to a destination. So the converter first returns me this is how I initialize it. And then I'm initiating the converter and return a string. That string is then being written into that destination, right?
Right.
So now, if I were to extrapolate that particular pattern, I have to write such a function for Markdown. So the same thing. So I have an MD file, which is my the output destination. I have a converter Markdown. Then I have a Hugo Markdown, and the template I've just implemented today, so where we can pass by a function in a file instead of having a built-in function, right? So now when we look at this, there is this converter function here. And remember, we implemented the converter, right?
Yeah.
So let's assume we just assume someone else has implemented it and simply says, okay, this thing returns a valid entry. So what we have to do is we have in the converter to do the following thing. We have to check if the source is actually a directory. if it's a directory, find me all the sources from that particular directory, right? This is what we did with this function. So this is this ls function that we have here. So now we store this, and sources is an array, okay? So now we can say this is if the source, however, is a string, a single entry, not an array, then I know that I have only one file to convert. So what I do is I create out of the one file a list with just one file. Then I can apply the same method. I can then loop through all the sources and invoke the converter for each one of them and start the conversion. See?
Mm-hmm.
And the conversion is a function that I'm passing along. Where do I get the conversion from? Well, it's defined in here, right? It's BibTeX.
Yeah.
So that means I can now create the real function that simplifies my life, where I can simply say, oh, there's a BibTeX function that converts the source, and I'm using this function here for a single file to convert in this convert program, because the convert program always assumes that's a list of files. And it needs just a converter. As simple as that, okay?
Okay.
So then we have the converter. The converter, however, needs to be now a little bit more specific, because we have to get the input file and convert it to an output file, right? So remember, now we have a text, we have a single file name, and we have some kind of mechanism of, where the file name is being located. And we have an input format. Here is our BibTeX entry. And the BibTeX entry is using the f-string format from Python, where you have a curly bracket that's being simply replaced by the value in the dictionary. And the value in the dictionary, we just simply define when we call this function. And I explain later what the data is that we have in the dictionary. But the thing is if we invoke now BibTeX entry of format on self.data, we can now get a text that represents this particular thing here, right? However, because Python has the quotes here at the beginning, these blank spaces would still be there. So with the dedent, I simply remove the blank spaces and create a BibTeX entry, such as this, while all these values here, title, name, web page, and data, and URL, are in that self.data. Okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just do this there, and then there are some special things that I need to do for example, Hugo, because I need to be looking into tags and entries. They're handled a little bit differently than the other ones. But this is in principle the same thing. So now how do I get the data? Well, here in content, I just read the name in, I ignore the form, but here we have a data, right? So the content of this thing is being read from a file. Then we have a URL that we need to be specifying. And that's the URL for Hugo, which I have predefined and hard-coded because we always have it there. And we can use then the edit URL, which is being used in Hugo. Then there is a data, a day, month, year, and so forth, which is being put in. And I can find this from the modified value out of my YAML file. Remember, this is where we read our YAML file. This is the YAML file content, right? So remember, we have in NIST
AWS deep.
Here's an example, right? So here, so all of these things I read in and put into the data directory. The only thing is that in order for me to think about, when things have been modified, I take the modified and change that particular value. This also means that when we go ahead, we need to have a checker. If the modified data here always uses this particular format, 22 to 25. If, for example, someone were to be putting in a different format, and I don't know if that's the case, I haven't checked that yet. So it looks like that people seem to have done this consistently here. Yeah, here. So for example, here you see a problem, right?
So could you just go through in either change?
All of these entries need to be fixed.
Okay.
So
you have that first.
We're writing a program that says this is find me all inconsistent, modified, and created dates with the catalog. But that's up to you guys. If you want to do this, you can do this by hand or you can write a program.
Could you even just modify the bib text entry and just put it to like where date comes first, and then you could just switch those strings out with like a dot replace function?
Sure, I could do this, but that would be too complicated, right? Why don't we fix the source?
The source?
The YAML data.
Okay, yeah, or I mean, could just go through and fix the YAML data.
Yeah, that's what we need to do.
Okay, and so the for the modified and created, is it the year? No, is it the month that comes first?
That's something that you guys need to be deciding. That's your decision how you do it, right? That's something that you guys need to discuss on the Slack. I noticed that there's an inconsistency with the date definition of modified and created. Some people do it this way, some people do it that way. That should not be the case. We should have a function that's called check. So where you run this YAML file on this thing and verify if, for example, the date is correct or not. And then I will explain that later a little bit. So maybe modifying the check. Okay. So we now know that we have an issue here with the date. One other things that we have is we have to at times add new stuff. Each entry, for example, needs to have a short description, which is based on our Hugo definition. So we don't want to have a description just that is that long, but we need to have one that's called short description. So we need to have an additional field because we have identified we need to have additional field. We need to be adding it. And then we put that particular field to that entry. Then I'm unclear about what the slug entry actually is. This is something from Hugo. I don't think actually we need that. Instead, we should have a short description. So all of this thing can be done by hand. As we don't have that many entries, I think it's faster to do by hand because I have done a lot of entries by hand, a lot of fixing by hand, basically. I went through each one of these entries and fixed something, I believe. So I would suggest do that. Now, things like this here, and ampersand signs, should not be used. It's called and.
Mm-hmm.
Because these signs are causing problems in the long run in case we are using different frameworks to convert things to. And I've seen also a lot of people are using wrong minus signs because they just paste and copy and more wrong quotes. So things need to be cleaned out a little bit. Right? So and then it's unclear to me why we have this thing here. For further information, please visit this. And we have documentation this, and this is unclear here why these things are different. If they are different, do we have to have an array of documentation rather than a single entry? So the person who has done this, has here a website, has all kinds of information in here, but he hasn't gone through this thing. What is actually needed? You just pass it and copied without
almost like a description. It shouldn't really include.
It's just coming from somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But the thing hasn't been curated. And the curation now opens up a couple of questions. Do we have to have a single documentation or multiple documentation? Do we have a different entry, such as website documentation and help email or support email? Should that be added? You know, and this is something that you guys need to be discussing. So then we have now, let's go back to this programming part. So we have the converter. The converter now has all the data from YAML in there. And the only thing I'm just doing is I'm reading in my template and I'm replacing all the variables that I see from YAML in there. And this is done. It's finished. So I can now go ahead and simply say, so let's just grab one entry. Let's say augmented. What is this? Amazon augmented AI.yaml, right? So if we cat this is our entry. Now, if we cat the BIP entry, we see here is our BIP entry, right?
Okay.
Now we see something curious. There's an unknown thing there. Why is there an unknown thing? So we now
the ID.
We now need to go to the source, right? So we need to verify if this thing is actually done correctly. So we go to the source in NIST, right? So we have the catalog, we were in Amazon, and I think we popped the first one up, AI, right? So that's a BIP tag entry. This is unknown. The markdown seems like reasonably correct, but here we have an ID as unknown. However, in the last meeting, we said, each of you needs to be identifying an ID for this, right? So what's our ID for this? Well, we just copy this here and simply say Amazon underscore augmented AI. So the person who has entered this particular thing has not been careful enough to put something like this in there. So if I now rerun my script now, okay. So I can now go to my BibTeX entry, and all of a sudden now I have a correct BibTeX entry, right? So as you see, this is the BibTeX entry gets automatically developed.
So how did you actually update? You just used the source command?
Yeah, I just used the command on the command line here. This catalog export BibTeX. But remember, I'm standing here in the NIST directory in this one.
Okay.
The development is done in the catalog directory, right?
Okay.
So there isn't really anything.
I think I'm going to create a documentation of all the commands that actually include this converter, because it would be nice just to see all the commands on like one page, just so that you could easily, do conversions.
Well, there are so many commands already, so I'm not sure if there is any benefit from doing this. But I think what you want to do is you don't want to collect all the commands. What you want to do is this is how I'm going to be using it.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So let's just assume I want to do this from the beginning on. So that we know that in the NIST directory we have a README in there, right? Or we don't have it. So actually there is no README there. So maybe the one thing that we need to do is we need to create a file that's called README, right? .md. So now we know that we want to follow actually what we are doing in the AI services stuff. So AI services is our other catalog project where we have a full-fledged installation instructions. We just copy it. And we put it now into the NIST directory, because this is what you guys are currently looking at. Okay, so where's our NIST README? So now we simply say install, right? So how do we install this? Oh, so sorry. Now So this is my installation instructions for the other project. As you can see, we don't necessarily need here this AI stuff because this is a little bit more advanced, but we need to have the cloudmesh catalog and cloudmesh installer. We don't need the symbolic link creation. We don't need that. So this is where we currently are. And then, you edit things, modify entries. You go into CD list, and then edit the entries in catalog. After you have done that, edit the entry in the catalog. Let's assume this would be example, like example. We have, we can just grab one of those guys here, right? Copy. Paste. So this is our example that we want to edit. So we are standing in this directory, right? So now we can say edit Emacs, and then we can use your favorite editor. So now we save it, and then what we do afterwards is git commit -m, describe what you changed, and then the file name. Oops. So now you have a mechanism on how do you save entries. Naturally, if you are a little bit more advanced in Git, I save multiple entries at the same time, but this requires that you are in sync with the other people in the project. So that's it. Now, I just put this now in here. So now now we have pushed all the changes. Now if I say git status, I have it. And then before you work, before you do anything, also work, do a git pull first.
And you could just CD into each directory and git pull from everything.
Git pull updates all the directories at the same time.
Okay.
So there's only one git pull needed. And then we have here bash, and then we have git pull. You should be standing here cd list git pull cd / cloudmesh -catalog git pull. So we can also do this like this. So this way it may be a little easier for you to paste and copy from here. And then you can go to whatever directory you are. So just remember, this is just pulling you the up-to-date versions, right?
Mm.
So I would normally not describe this, but because you guys seem to be not that familiar yet with GitHub, so let's just spell it out. So this is all that's necessary. So now let me commit it again. Okay, good. So we have that clarified, right?
Yeah.
So now, how do you modify, for example, a missing thing in, for example, the Hugo thing, right? So remember, I can execute on the. I'm standing here in NIST, right? I can execute here Hugo on the source code. So I say Hugo. Everything will be modified. So now in my program here, I may decide I want to have an additional field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, for example, we go here in our converter. Remember, this was our field?
Yep.
And so now I may be, so let me just look for the Hugo here, Hugo Markdown, okay? So there are certain things in here, link title missing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there is a missing feature there that is not being done. Now the question is this link title actually being part of my document or not? If it's not part of my document, I probably would like to have something that I can convert to a link title.
Now you could almost grab the link tile from the documentation of a YAML file.
Yes. So I could be here, for example, make here title, right? Then it would take the title as a link title. Now, but what that means in Hugo is there is on the left-hand side a small thing that needs to be called, and that's the reason why this thing is somewhat wrong, and we need to be fixing this. Then the other question is this particular template really the best template from the metadata that I have? Is there metadata that should be included in this thing or not? Okay. So, and we are actually at the 1 hour mark. So what I will do now is I will stop this recording, and then